Welcome to the Irishman, Englishman and Scotsman Football Podcast. Hello, and you're very welcome back to another episode of the Irishman, Englishman and Scotsman Football Podcast. Joining me in the studio, Kev, how are we doing?
Yeah, not so bad, JP. Nice to be here.
Kev still got his tan from his sun-kissed holiday 2 weeks ago. Fino in Scotland, how are we doing, buddy?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. How are you guys?
Must have been a while since the sun was shining in Scotland.
Yeah, it's definitely not Tenerife.
Joe is in Salzburg, but he's not in the studio. How are you doing, Joe?
Evening, JP. Yeah, very well, thank you.
I heard a rumour you were afraid to come into the studio after Southampton's win last week.
I was actually stuck in the office, unfortunately.
Okay. Right, just to run through what we're going to be doing on this week's show. Of course, there is no Premier League games coming up this weekend because of the international break. So we're going to have a look back at the results from last weekend's Premier League games. We're going to have a look at penalties and penalty takers, which is a big talking point after last week. Of course, the international break is coming up. We're going to have a look at which team is suited best by this break and which team does it not suit. Right, there's only one place to start, and that was at St. Mary's on Friday night, Joe. Southampton 2, Newcastle 0. Really disappointed. I've nothing much to say in the defence of Newcastle. You sent a message saying that how is it not 3-0, and you hit the bar, I think, a few times, and you really dominated the whole game without Danny Ings and a couple of players. Newcastle were missing Shelby, but they never turned up on the night. And Southampton, for the first time in 360 years, topped the league.
First time since 1988 that we topped the league.
Oh, sorry.
It was incredible. I think the only disappointment was that it wasn't 5-0. I think Cardalo made an amazing save, didn't he?
He made a few, yeah.
You know, King Ralph taking Saints to top the league. What really pleased me was that it wasn't a fluke, you know. This is after 8 games. It's not after 1 game or 2 games when, you know, some teams go top a little bit luckily. We deserve to be there for 2 days. No, I'm only joking. Obviously, we're not going to be there come the end of the season. But this kind of thing doesn't happen to Southampton fans. The last 2 or 3 years, we've been fighting relegation. It's been a really difficult time. So to do it playing such good football, the fans are just overjoyed, and I think they fully deserve the right to flood social media with some nonsense for the last couple of days.
I think you can definitely all enjoy it, but don't forget as well, long-term listeners of this podcast will perhaps remember that Joe didn't join us for the first few this season when Southampton had a terrible start, and we were all saying, oh God, it's going to be tough for them to come back from that one. So actually it's even more remarkable, isn't it? Because they lost their first 2, right?
Yeah, so they lost against Crystal Palace first game of the season and then got absolutely thumped by Tottenham in the next game. And we were all kind of thinking, hang on, all of the promise that we showed at the back end of last season hasn't quite come to fruition. But then somehow we've turned it around. I think heavily impacted by Yannick Vestergaard, our centre-back, who's been an absolute colossal, and the partnership of Che Adams and Danny Ings.
Where did Che Adams come from? He was a bit of a beast. He scored a cracking goal, and just before he scored the goal, he had this real, a super fast snapshot from 25 yards that was going into the top corner, and Cardalo knocked it away. I've obviously heard you speaking about Che Adams a while ago, Joe, but is he a youth product of Southampton, or did you sign him from the lower leagues, or where did he come from?
Yes, we signed him from Birmingham, and he had a really difficult first season. He didn't really hit the ground running. He went a lot of games without scoring, and we were all kind of wondering, is he going to do it? Is he not? We almost sold him to Leeds last January. Luckily, we didn't. We kept him, and he's now on a fantastic run.
Yeah, he was a real handful for the Newcastle defence. Brighton 0, Burnley 0 was the other game on Friday night, which we predicted as a poor draw, and it turned out to be an absolute poor draw. Moving on to Saturday's games, Everton 1, Manchester United 3. Kevin, of course, predicted that United would do Everton, and they did. Bernard with the goal for Everton, putting them ahead. 2 from Bruno Fernandes, and the unsung hero of Edison Cavani, who Roy Keane said hasn't warmed up since he's joined United, got on the score sheet.
So Ole Gunnar Solskjaer always seems to find a way, doesn't he, to come back from the brink. All the talk in the press beforehand was Pochettino may take over. How long has Solskjaer got left? But they had a really good performance, I think. Bruno Fernandes, what a signing he's been. Always seems to, come up in the big moments. And then Cavani as well.
I just think they're impossible to predict. I don't think anyone knows what Man United are going to do. Least of all Man United, least of all Solskjaer. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but you just never know which version of the team's gonna come up. I think it's all a bit chaotic. We'll speak a bit more about that when we get on to Man City later on. But yeah, it's just like a bit of chaos. You don't know what's going to happen. It's quite fun, and good result for them. Bit worrying for Everton though, right?
Yeah, Everton lost 3 on the bounce. Now, just you brought up there, Joe, what a signing Bruno Fernandes has been. I think he's probably the most influential new signing in the Premier League in the last season or season and a half, possibly. You mean up there with Aubameyang? He's just been unbelievable. Okay, Man United haven't won any silverware yet. If they will, who knows? But just for a guy to come in without taking time to settle, I mean, he was brilliant at the end of last season. This season, he's more or less carrying the team.
I mean, again, I think eye-catching, right? So definitely helped the team, like no question about that. Like you say, he was everyone's darling, wasn't he, at the end of last season? I think people were talking about him as player of the season, even though he only played half a season last year. Again, I just think he's a bit on and off, that's all. I think, when he turns it on, absolutely fine, for Man U. But he's not there week in, week out, so it remains to be seen. That's, pretty good.
Yeah, big result for Manchester United, having a couple of mixed results and then the defeat in the Champions League out in Turkey. They needed a result and then they've kept it going, and they climbed up the table a little bit now. They're up to 14. So, yeah, Crystal Palace 4, Leeds 1. I mean, who's seen this one coming? Leeds have been brilliant or brilliantly terrible this season. And Bamford scores again, but Palace run riot.
I mean, I think the big talking point in this game was the ridiculous offside decision for Bamford. So basically, if you didn't see it, he pointed where he wanted his midfielder to play the ball through. Perfect pass, perfect goal. But then he got pulled up for being offside because his finger, when he was pointing, was offside. Absolutely ridiculous. And then I think Leeds lost a little bit of confidence from that. And then Crystal Palace scored a couple of fantastic goals. Leeds also conceded a free cone goal. But I think that is a bit of a problem for Leeds now. They've conceded 4 goals on 3 occasions, I believe, now. So they want to tighten that defence.
I mean, Kevin did say earlier on, when they had a couple of 4-3s foreign against them, that they weren't going to win anything this season, but they were going to be spectacularly entertaining and scoring goals and conceding goals. And they follow suit. Bielsa ball is carrying on, and Leeds either way. There's loads of goals in every Leeds game, whether you're a Leeds fan or not. They're good to watch. Fino, your highlight of the weekend was on Saturday night. A very, very, very late goal for West Ham against Fulham.
Yeah, no, I mean, I said last week I was worried that we might get turned over. And in the second half, I thought we were very close to being turned over, to be honest. We looked really poor. We looked sluggish. Scott Parker had that Fulham team playing some nice football. Even when we went 1-0 up, we endeavoured to try and chuck it away with a last-minute penalty. To be honest, it was a poor performance from West Ham, but 3 points is 3 points, and I'll happily take it. And it looks like Thomas Souček is maybe, one of the bargains of the last kind of 12, 18 months. He came in January, and he's really galvanised that West Ham team. He adds height from the midfield. He's got a bit of a pass about him. Not the positives that we took from the games against Liverpool and Man City, but definitely 3 points on the board. Can't really ask for much more.
Mate, take the points over the positives anytime.
Definitely.
Yeah, take it over the penalty as well. What a penalty that was, lads, huh?
I don't know what to say about that. I honestly don't. I think it might be one of the worst penalties ever taken. But it's somehow worse though, right? Because of when it happens. It's not like this happens in the 23rd minute or something like that. The fact that this happens with a few seconds to go and a chance to turn it around just made it all the more tragic.
But if it goes in, he's a genius.
Yeah, I think what was interesting was Scott Parker talking afterwards, and he says, I think his verbatim quote was something like, "You just can't miss a penalty if you take it like that." And that's a bit of a strange thing to say when you unpack that statement, right? Because it's saying if you score it, okay, but if you don't, well, okay, but if you take 100 like that, you're going to miss one anyway. And like I say, it's tragic, and I take no delight in talking about it as tragic. But if you look, you can look at some of the great players. Like go and do a Google search, as probably many of us have done. I'm sure there's articles all over the internet now about like the 10 or 20 or 50 worst penalties ever. If you go and look down a list like that, you'll see some absolutely great players have had some stinkers. I had a really quick look earlier on, and you've got people like Pirlo, absolute greats of the game, have made atrocious messes of penalty kicks in the past. So I just sort of think, poor fella, more than anything else. But I do worry for him. I think it's hard when it's in that sort of situation, and I hope he comes back and nets a hat trick in the next game.
Yeah, let's hope Luck returns to Lookman's side.
Lookman was definitely the whipping boy, I suppose, but you also have to think of the context in which the penalty was taken. Fulham are scrambling for points, and I think Scott Parker was right. Publicly giving him a bit of abuse almost. You could see the West Ham players were almost shell-shocked at the fact that this had happened. They weren't really sure what to do. And I think, again, it is the manner in which he hit that penalty. It's not as if he skied it over the bar trying to put his laces through it. It is just this absolute pathetic mess of a penalty. It kind of sums up Fulham's season so far.
I'm trying to remember when that came in, Kev. Because growing up, I never seen... I'm a little bit younger than you, obviously, but I mean, I've never seen somebody...
Most people are.
Yeah, but like as far as penalties goes, they were even in the bottom corner or in the top corner. Nobody ever tried to knock one down the middle. I've never seen it until I think...
Well, it was Panenka, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was the Czech player. So that was must have been in the 1970s sometime. I'm sure someone with access to Google will correct me if I'm wrong. We've seen a few of them because we saw one from Brighton earlier on this season as well. So I don't know if people are starting to just get a bit more cute, but it feels like it's been a bit more common, people having a dab at it this time, yeah.
I think it started in the Premier League around the Arsenal Invincible eras. Maybe someone like Robert Pires might have taken one and knocked it straight at the goalkeeper around then, But it's a terrible way to take a penalty, really, because you're giving the goalkeeper all the chance in the world. If you put your head down and bang it in the bottom corner, chances are you're going to score.
What do you reckon, Joe? Would you be a glory boy going for that, or stick it in the corner?
Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. I would drill it as hard as I possibly could.
Yeah. Any particular direction, Joe?
Bottom left.
I wouldn't. I'd be so scared of missing it. That's the thing. I'd do Jamie Carragher like in that. What was that? The World Cup. One of England's many defeats in the World Cup, where he scored it. Actually, I remember Jamie Carragher scored it, and then he had to retake it, and then he just came back and closed his eyes and swatted it. Of course, he got saved.
Jamie Carragher. Moving on to Sunday, West Brom 0, Tottenham 1. Devastating for West Brom. Harry Kane again, 88 minutes. I said a couple of weeks ago, guys, I think Tottenham are going to be there at the end of the season.
I think they are too.
Yep.
This is the thing. This has been a theme ever since we started this podcast, isn't it? It's not just winning ugly. I'm not sure if that's the right phrase, but it's like having a variety, finding a way. That was always my mantra last season in that season, watching Liverpool and just hoping for the best, because there were so many nervy wins by one goal. It was just like, can the team just find a way? And they seem to pull out from nowhere a way to find the goal. And last week it was it was Gareth Bale. You get into that habit somehow, don't you? I think and of thinking, of not panicking. Again, looking back at the great sides, I think all the great sides, there's certainly the multiple title winning sides have always given you that feeling that they will find a way to win. It's early days, you can't read too much into it. It was West Brom, for God's sake, so let's not get too carried away. But they did find a way, all credit to them. And I reckon, looking at it the way it started, I'd be really surprised now if they went in the top four. And go even further, I'd be surprised if they don't give it a bit of a go for the title.
I think they've got the players. They certainly have the forward players. If Tottenham win the league this season, and it's a massive if, would that be Mourinho's greatest achievement since the Champions League at Porto?
Yes, 100%. I was waiting for you just to say greatest achievement, and I was all ready to pounce on you to say that no, the Champions League with Porto is definitely more important. But no, I think Tottenham, I think their last trophy is 12 years old now. It's like the 2008 League Cup. They've not really been, aside from the Champions League, they've not really been anywhere close to winning a trophy since. And I think this is the classic Mourinho style of football, where there's that kind of strong backbone of a team that are able to grind out results. It might not always be pretty, but yes, they can put teams to the sword when they've got their kind of backs up about it. You saw that with the West Ham game. And yeah, I think this is definitely a season to watch for Tottenham fans.
All right, here's one for you then. So their dream team. Sorry, Joe. Their dream forward line of Bale, Kane, and Son. I'm just going to seed this one for later, or perhaps someone who's listening to this can come in. Can you name like a better forward trio who've only got one syllable in their name each? All right, no one's going to think of one now, but anyway, one for the future.
Wow, Kev, you just baffled our listeners. Oh dear. Leicester 1, Wolves 0. You predicted this one, Fino. You said Leicester would win. I think I went for a draw. Jamie Vardy scored a penalty, but also missed a penalty. But it was enough for Leicester to go top of the league, and they're still there. You know, I remember at the back end of last season, Fino, you were on about how Vardy was up there with the greats, more goals than the likes of Drogba and Ronaldo, and he's still doing it. He's just consistently doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this was necessarily a shock result, but I think what was quite interesting about this game was actually the first penalty went to VAR. The camera angle showed how the referee saw the very first angle of the potential penalty shout, and he viewed it in slow motion. So he didn't see it in real time to see whether or not he thought it was a penalty, and obviously in slow motion, everything looks, more sinister, I suppose. That being said, I think both penalties were definitely penalties. Jamie Vardy, I think, has now scored 5 this season, so it shows that Leicester are definitely getting in and around the box, definitely committing defenders, which is good to see. That's 6 wins in a row now, and I said I think this last week or the week before. I think we need to take Leicester as a bit of a serious title contender, because if they're showing that level of consistency, that's really something that, title-winning teams have.
They're good to watch as well. I mean, most Brendan Rodgers teams are good to watch. But another thing is that they're very consistent at the back, and they certainly haven't missed Harry Maguire.
No, I just think what an amazing job Brendan Rodgers has done. They seem to have squad depth now. I know they've actually still got a couple of really major injuries, but they seem to have players who can step in and produce a really fantastic performance. And just a quick stat for you, Leicester actually have more points now at this stage than they did when they won the league.
Oh, in that title-winning season, you mean, after 8 games, yeah. That's a really interesting stat. And there's another one, though, about penalties. They've had a few penalties. I don't want to bang on about penalties at all, because people use it as a stick to beat Liverpool with, so it's boring in its own way.
That's in the post.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. No, but all I'd say about them is they do get in and around the box, sure. They don't take a lot of shots. They don't have a lot of shots on goal. A very high percentage of those goals are coming from penalties. I think it's 7 penalties. I mean, they've scored about the same as most of the top teams, so that's fair enough. But I think it's 7 pens in the league out of 18 goals. And I just sort of think, if I had to have a guess, I would, without wishing to write off their chances at all, I think we will see after the international break, we'll probably see a bit of reversion to mean kind of thing. I wouldn't be surprised if it just gets back to normal for them, if they, drop down a couple of places, maybe have a couple of dodgy results. I still think they've got a chance. Top 6 defo, top 4, who knows, and wouldn't dare to write them off, absolutely. But I just think they're getting a bit more, they're getting full value for everything at the moment. And let's see if that holds. And it probably won't, just because law of averages says it probably won't.
The Premier League is wide open so far. The next game, again, a penalty. Dodgy, jammy penalty for Liverpool, which was
they can't all be jammy, mate.
This one was. I mean, Fino, I'm sure you'll agree.
I mean, yeah, it was. But Kyle Walker's like that. He'll continuously run across his defenders to try and get a better defensive position. And more often than not, he ends up clipping them. And especially with that front line, you know that they're going to take any chance of, getting an advantage, which of course you would. I think what was more interesting was the Man City, the Joe Gomez incident.
Oh, that was handball.
But it's in his side, it's in a natural position. It's tough to say yes or no.
Yeah, I mean, calamity. Kyle Walker is a liability.
And that's the thing. That's why we can't always be arguing about penalties. But it was soft. Absolutely, it was soft. It doesn't mean it's not a penalty, though.
I don't think so, Kev. Sorry, it's too soft.
But you just always say that, though, when it's a Liverpool pen. When have you ever said that was a bang on pen, that, mate?
I mean, look, if it's not a bang on pen, I'll let you know. So. If Liverpool score a penalty and I don't complain about it, then it's fine.
Okay, then we'll know. By the law of omission, we'll know.
Yeah, Kev, you're going to run into Liverpool, Man City first now and give us your expert view. Salah scored a penalty for Liverpool. Gabriel Jesus scored for Man City.
Neat.
On the half-hour mark. I've got to say, it reminded me so much of Romario.
Yeah, it was a neat goal, that
This
wasn't
little super turn on the sixpence and a toe poke.
It was very nice. I thought it was for 45, 60 minutes maybe. You'd say it was a really great game. Honestly, I'd be interested in hearing what you guys said. I thought it was just mad. I thought Liverpool went out there thinking chaos. We may as well just make it chaos. 4-2-4 nominally. It's never like that in real life, is it? It's whatever you are in. Who was it who said, formations are for journalists, they're not for actual football players. But 4-2-4 on paper, bit mad. Liverpool, I thought, played a little bit like they did when we got hammered, last time by them. Played pretty well, for that first 20 or 30 minutes. Bit more luck. Things might have been very, very different had it been 2-0 maybe, but it wasn't, and it was absolutely fine. I just thought Liverpool were a bit crazy. Don't think there was much tactical about it, to be honest. Let's throw the kitchen sink at them and see if something comes out. And then the only tactical wouldn't be the right word, but I think the thing that was probably weighing on Klopp, or the thing that he was thinking about in the background, was both teams are really going to tire. We'll get onto this in a minute, I'm sure, about the substitutions, because it seems to be slightly coordinated between Klopp and Guardiola afterwards. But I think there was an admission, like, kind of thing that both sides are going to run out of steam, and certainly Liverpool, their best chance was just to go hell for leather and see if they could pick up 2 or 3 goals in that first 20 minutes. And actually, it almost came off. But like I say, I don't think it was any massive tactical nous or anything like that. I just think he thought, well, let's have a go at them and see what happens.
De Bruyne will be kicking himself, though, surely, after that penalty. I mean, he didn't go down the middle. He went to the corner, but he pulled it wide, and, devastating for him and for Man City, because that really could have kick-started their season. Joe, do you see any of these two as title contenders to Southampton?
I actually see Leicester at the moment as more
as the biggest threat.
as the biggest threat.
Dear me.
No, I think it's a much better result for Liverpool than it was for Man City. Like Kev, I was very surprised that they paid Jota and Firmino in the same team from the start.
Yeah.
And I'd never have expected De Bruyne to miss the penalty. So no, I still see Liverpool as Man City, as they're going to be the top two come the end of the season. Which way round, I'm not quite sure yet.
Don't rule out Tottenham, but I think it was a massive miss for De Bruyne. Basically not just because of the game, because of the way Man City's season has gone so far. Win against Liverpool, going into the break, kickstarts them, and they're flying. And then full of confidence coming back in. Okay, guys, let's do this. But the draw, it's a better result for Liverpool than it is for Man City. Would you agree, Fino?
Liverpool will be happier with the point. I think what was really positive for Man City is that they had Jesus back and he was scoring goals, and it was a bit more of that kind of striker's instinct that they've been missing over the last few weeks, once Aguero went down again. So I think there's positives. I think De Bruyne will be kicking himself for missing that penalty, because I think it could have properly put a marker down for Man City. I think probably for the league as a whole, it's the most interesting result that there could have been.
Yeah, I think you're right, mate. The only thing I'd say about Man City, and as I'm sure you all agree, I'm extremely fair about talking about Liverpool's title rivals. So the only thing I'd say is I didn't think Man City were all that good either. I just think Liverpool were okay. Like I say, tactically, whatever. They just throw the kitchen sink at it. It just surprised me again. Man City were just a bit, they were fine. And they did have a good spell, right? So they went behind. And then I thought they were really good for maybe 20 minutes or something like that. I think De Bruyne, obviously, get De Bruyne on the ball, and they look like magic. As JP pointed out right at the start, Gabriel Jesus as well. Fantastic, to see him playing some football. But I don't know about the rest of the midfield, apart from De Bruyne. I just can't get excited about them. I thought they were solid, good keeper, decent defence. De Bruyne magic darts. And then otherwise, meh. Just look a bit meh. It just surprises me, really. Big international break coming up. Guardiola, can he inspire them right now to come back and to turn it on, and turn in one of those runs where you win 10 on the spin? And let's see. I'm not sure.
I don't think Gundogan and Kyle Walker are up to Guardiola and Man City standards, to be honest.
Talking of right backs there with Kyle Walker, I just saw the news today that Trent Alexander-Arnold will be out for 4 to 6 weeks with a hamstring injury. I just wanted to ask Kev if he thinks that will have a massive impact.
I think I'm not sure when you saw that. Liverpool also said that was maybe a bit premature. It was like watching the American elections on this one, Trent Alexander-Arnold. You got one side sort of saying it's done and dusted, the other side saying it's not. Wait and see. If he's out for that amount of time, it's sad because He's been a little bit hot and cold, but I think people have heard me say, I felt like he's been getting back to his best. And when he is at his best, he's obviously such a lovely player to watch. He's great for England. He's great for the Premier League because he's turning into one of those players. He's turning into a marquee player. I think it'd be really sad again if we lose him, because 4 to 6 weeks, you never know, do you? Maybe if international break coming up, if it's 4 weeks, maybe basically gets a couple of weeks rest. But if it's 6 weeks, it starts to eat into the rest of the season. That would be just a real shame, actually, because he's one of those players. He's, even if you hate Liverpool, he's not exactly an easy player to hate.
The Irishman, Englishman, Scotsman Football Podcast, the only place in the world where you will hear Trent Alexander-Arnold in the same sentence as the American elections. Thank you, Kev. But no, I really rate him. I think he's the best right back in the Premier League. His passing is unbelievable, and free kicks, he's a cracking player. Arsenal 0, Aston Villa 3.
Yeah, there's no excuse. I know we were talking about the 3 subs and 5 subs. There was 9 changes in that Arsenal team from the Thursday night in Europe. And defensively, they just looked so narrow. I think there was a couple of times where I watched Villa and they were just pinging the ball back and forth. And there was no closing down. There was acres of space. I think even in Villa's second goal, Ross Barkley just walks into the box completely unmarked. Just awful defensively. And I think Arteta's going to have to find a way to stop the rot somehow. Obviously, Martinez, first time back at the Emirates after leaving. And I think he was a bit vindicated, to be honest, keeping a clean sheet. Leno definitely had the harder of the game. You would think it was a shock, but actually the way that Villa played, they were exceptionally good value for their money.
Joe, a few weeks ago when Villa destroyed Liverpool 7-1, you were talking about the amazing story of Ollie Watkins, and he's banged in 2 again.
Yeah, again, he's shown that he can score goals in the biggest of games. He looked fantastic, and obviously having the supply line of Barkley and Grealish, it must be a striker's dream. Like I said, he's one who's come through the leagues. I think he's scored goals in League 2, League 1, Championship, and now the Premier League. And yeah, Villa, I wasn't sure after they lost a couple of games. I thought, where's their season going to go? But, this result, it looks like it's going to be very promising for them for the rest of the season.
Arsenal, it's hard to know what to think. They looked really good at the start. And again, the same old Arsenal. It's hard to know what's what with Arsenal. But Villa, after a disappointing couple of results, this is a huge win for them. And going into the international break, they'll be buzzing as well. And that Ollie Watkins, where's he going to be next season?
Yeah, I can't answer that. But I tell you, looking at that league table, it's a dream for anyone who wants to hark back to the sort of days of before the so-called Big Six, right? Just look at that. I mean, like Villa have just surged back up to that top 6 spot. So you got Leicester, Tottenham, Liverpool, Southampton, Chelsea, Aston Villa. It's a banger top 6 that. And with Everton still, Everton seem to be in a bit of a free fall. But Everton and Palace just below them. You just think, wow, that's football again, isn't it? It's like turning the clock back about 30 years. That
Man City and Man United have games in hand, of course. So they were the results of the weekend of the Premier League. Of course, we have no games next weekend, so the international break is coming up. And we were just chatting earlier on about which teams that we think will be happy that the international break is here. I'll go first, and I think it's Arsenal, actually, because, that they'll get a chance to regroup and to try and think what the hell went wrong. I mean, how many players are going away on international duty? I'm not sure, but Arsenal are a team, I think, that definitely after that result, devastating result, and they need to turn things around. Who have you got, Fino?
I think it's whoever has the least internationals going out. Fewer flights, less COVID risk, no potential quarantining. There's already been, in the last international break, quite a few cases. Yeah, so if you can get your players into training after a few days rest, get them focused on that game on the 21st, you've definitely got a lot of planning time to get ahead. If you're an Arsenal or Man City and players are coming in from all over the world, they might not get in until the Friday night, and then they're playing Saturday, Sunday. So yeah, any team that has the least internationals is who I'm picking.
That was a very Alan Hansen-esque answer, Fino. Joe?
So I think it's come at a good time for Leeds United. Like I said, they've been conceding a lot of goals recently. And we know that their manager, Marcelo Bielsa, leaves no stone unturned. So I fully expect him to spend the next 2 weeks in a dark room somewhere, analysing video footage and stats, so that when they come back, they won't have as much of a leakier defence.
I think it's all the top teams. So I think this is basically a restart. I think it's so close between all those teams. And you just mentioned it just now, that Man City are down in, 10th? But they got a game in hand.
Yeah, Man United have a game in hand also.
Yeah, Man United, even though they're down in 14th and with 3 points or a couple of points worse off, it's nothing. This could have been, and Fino, you mentioned this earlier in the season, right? It could have been. It wouldn't be that ridiculous if Liverpool were on 22 points, right? Or if if the season had worked out differently, if Man City had been something like that. Or this time last year, Liverpool were basically perfect. And no one is, and it's a million miles away from that. It's weird. I was thinking about this a little bit on the bus on the way down here. Because we're dissecting all this week in, week out, where, you're trying to sort of jump to conclusions about teams. But really, we don't know if Leicester, Tottenham, even Aston Villa, whatever, if they've really got a chance. All I'd say is it's so bunched at the top. There's nothing in it. But I think all those teams who've had some injuries, whose players had no rest, and you've heard Guardiola and Klopp moan about this constantly, I think they'll be rubbing their hands and delighted and sort of thinking, all right, basically a restart. We've lost nothing. It's now a 30-game season. Certainly Liverpool, 1 point behind. That's nothing for them. City, all right, win the game in hand and they're three off the lead. It's still nothing. And I just think they'll be thinking, wow, this is it. It's there for the taking. It's one big, meaty run away from us making a huge statement. So I think all of them, Man City, Liverpool, even Man United, certainly look at Chelsea. Chelsea look like they're about to, take on the world. I think all those big teams were thinking, thanks very much that no one has made the most of this chance.
My money's still on Tottenham to get down to bookies now. I think they should have been really on 21 points. They were robbed by West Ham and by Newcastle late on. So, I think they look good, and I think they'll be there near the end. Bad time at the break for Southampton. Bad time to come. I think they'll think your party's over now, Joe. Sorry, I'm still
completely agree.
I'm still bitter after Friday night. Okay, guys.
He'll be banging on now about Southampton getting penalties for about the next 6 weeks. You just wait. He'll be there going, no, that was awful. It was never a pen.
Right, so that's the results. Of course, we have no Premier League games coming up this weekend, so we're going to have a chat about one or two other things, including these 5 subs. I'm all for it. I'd say go for it.
I mean, they all have to play from their same squad, so I guess it's 6 and 2 3s really. But Ian Wright made a pretty interesting comment where he said maybe when teams both play in Europe, i.e. Liverpool and Man City at the weekend, they can benefit from the 5 subs. But against non-European teams, it goes back to the 3-sub rule. And I understand it from a smaller team's perspective that they want to try and get these big teams on an off day. And for neutral fans, it's kind of more exciting when you see these kind of interesting or shock games or results. But yeah, I mean, we also have to take the players' safety into consideration. I'm sure there's been a huge increase in muscle injuries over the start of this season. And Arsenal showed this weekend, okay, not very well, but it is possible to compete on both fronts with a big squad.
Well, what if, the whole of Europe decided to go ahead and do it? Because everyone's kind of in the same boat in the sense that everyone's had, a delayed end to the season, an early start to the new season, and then boom, like you said, a lot of muscle injuries, Fino, and players getting injured, a ridiculous amount of injuries. Maybe increase the match day size, to do something like this until we get back into maybe the start of next season. If things, please God, go back to normal and the COVID goes away and next season is normal again. But I think they've got to make some kind of changes to kind of accommodate the situation that teams are in at the minute.
I think it's a really difficult one. As a Southampton fan, a fan of one of the smaller clubs, I'm not in favour of having 5 substitutes.
Smaller clubs? You said you were going to win the league last week.
Because you look at the bench of Man City at the weekend, they had the likes of Stones, Nathan Ake, Bernardo Silva, Foden, Zinchenko on the bench. It's an array of talent. And clubs down the lower end do not have that depth to their squad. So it is unfair. And I thought it was interesting as well that Guardiola and Klopp both said afterwards that they want 5 substitutes, but neither of them used their allocation of 3 for this match.
Yeah, I think you've got a point actually, Joe. The only reason why I think it's interesting why I think they might be right is why is the Premier League different from the other big leagues, I suppose. So that's something to consider. But otherwise, no, I don't really have any massive sympathy for them. I think 3 subs is fine, really. Was it Chelsea against Liverpool last year? Was that one of those games where Chelsea took off their entire forward line and replaced them? I think they were getting tonked, weren't they? I think it was one of those games where Liverpool won about 5-2 or 5-3 at the end of last season, and Chelsea were getting tonked, and then they took off the 3 forwards and replaced them with 3 other forwards, and it just seemed to be, oh, hang on a minute, it's a bit of a game changer. That's something you can only really do with
5-4 or 5-3
maybe, something like that. Yeah, and that felt interesting. I would say that. I have no real sympathy for the big clubs, but it's a bit odd that the Premier League's always different. I think that was the point they were making, wasn't it? I think Guardiola and Klopp both tried to make that point.
Good point there, Joe, actually, about the bigger clubs and coming off the bench. I watched Newcastle Man United a couple of weeks ago, and the game was tied 1-1, and Andy Carroll came off the bench, who was a loan signing on a free transfer. Well, Man United brought on Paul Pogba and Donny van de Beek, and that's what you're up against, really.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to have a chat quickly about penalties because, with Lookman and then, of course, De Bruyne missing and then the jammy penalties Liverpool get and, penalties. The week's about penalties. If you were to put £1 million on any player of all time in the world of football to take a penalty, who would it be? Now, this is not just for you guys, it's for the listeners as well. So don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and, of course, to like and follow on Spotify and the rest of the social media platforms. And just if you're listening, stick in a comment and let us know who you think would be the £1 million penalty taker for you. I'm going to go for Alan Shearer.
I bet you are.
Yeah, always solid. I mean, inside the right foot, he kind of would dip the left shoulder, give the keeper the eye and bang it in the corner every single time. Yeah, unbelievable. Pretty obvious who you're going to go for, Joe.
Yeah, so being a Southampton fan, I have 2 very strong options here.
Alan Shearer?
Ricky Lambert actually got 34 out of 34 for Southampton. He never missed one. But I have to go for Matt Le Tissier. Had an amazing record. He scored 47 out of 48 penalties. Almost unstoppable.
I had Matt Le Tissier as well, but if I was to go for another one and a bit more of a niche one and a Rangers player, I'll go with a player that played for Rangers in the 50s and was nicknamed the Penalty King. So he scored 65 and 68. He scored 22 penalties on the trot. His name is Johnny Hubbard. He was South African. Yeah, I think he would be my choice.
Is he the last South African player to play for Rangers?
No, we've actually got a South African at the moment.
Really?
Yeah, Bongani Zungu, yeah.
I tell you what, we should talk sometime about Rangers and their defensive record. That's amazing, that, isn't it? I mean, I know it was a bit of a different story in the Europa League, but how many have they conceded in the league now?
Oh, very few. I think we're looking good, and the weekend was a nice one. We won 8-0 against Hamilton, so that's always nice to rack up a bit of goal difference.
Wow. Okay, right, moving on. Running out of time soon. Kev, you're a penalty taker. Surely a Liverpool player.
Well, do you know what? The only thing I'd say is I think the stats sometimes don't tell the story of how the waves that and the confidence that some players go in. And the only reason I say that I was reminded when Salah took the latest of his dodgy, jammy penalties, as I'm sure you'd say, JP, this weekend. I think he's really solid now, and he used to make me nervous when he took penalties, but really solid. Now, it's not always as simple as like the great, as always being one player always in form. And the other player, of course, who went through phases. I was terrified nearer the start of his career when Steven Gerrard took a player, but towards the end he was absolutely impeccable. And so I don't know, just not over the course of a career, but maybe sort of Gerrard at the time when he scored about 2 or 3 in one game against Man United, I might take him. Not for England.
Didn't he get about 25 in that season when he slipped? 25. I mean, you were given 25 penalties. Sure if I was to pick anybody else, I would go for Ronald Koeman, the old Barcelona and Holland player, right-footed free kicks, penalties. He was just, waxing lyrical on the pitch. Speaking of waxing lyrical,
Thank you, man.
Our host Shakespeare, Kev, has got another fantastic poem for us this week. Go ahead, Kev.
All right, once more. I'm really disappointed no one ever seems to get the literary references. The youth of... I don't know what you learn in school these days. But anyway, here we go. One more. This poem was going to be about Marcus Rashford at the end, but something so extraordinary happened that we talked about earlier on, then I'm afraid that the last 4 or 5 stanzas turned into all about this poor bloke. Anyway, here we go. I wandered lonely as a cloud, not to the pub, that's not allowed. Afoot I chose to contemplate how best to sum up match week 8. Gadzooks, thought I, the problem's vexing, the table strange, the form perplexing. The favourites drew up in Manchester, and look who's top, by Jove, it's Leicester. So let's start there at Filbert Street, where Wolves went down to a defeat through Leicester City's specialty, a frankly dodgy penalty. Their 8th this season, coolly struck by Vardy as Wolves cursed their luck. And me? Well, what more's left to say? This VAR has had its day. But back to happier remarks. Southampton take St James's Park, where Adams, Armstrong, Walker, Peters played like genuine world beaters. They win 2-0 and thus enable a 2-night stay atop the table. It couldn't last, but who's to say they won't be back again someday? Also looking strong are Chelsea, who now that they've got Ziyech healthy, 1-4-1 v Sheffield United, the Blades outclassed, naive, benighted. Tottenham were somewhat less nifty, but Kane scored goal 150, as usual, struck with aplomb to seal a 1-0 at West Brom. Liverpool slipped down to 3rd, more theatre of the absurd. Salah scores first from the spot, but then the Blues tie them in knots. That turn and shot from Gabe Jesus, Kevin De Bruyne on the loose, a spot kick chance, then heaven sent, a bad miss from the man from Ghent. But that was not the worst mistake we'd see a poor attacker make. You want a pen struck by the bookman? Don't call Adamola Lookman. West Ham leading, seconds left. Suddenly though, look bereft as Fulham earn a chance to loot a point. But no, he gets too cute. Trying to be far too clever, he scuffs maybe the worst pen ever. And as his teammates look on blankly, it trickles through to Fabianski. Everyone is quite astonished, the player publicly admonished, and worst of all, I think for him, his name will be a synonym. For fans are sometimes unkind, folks, and every time somebody chokes, I fear that crowds the whole world over will say, he's done an Adamola.
Wow. Brilliant stuff again, Kev. This has been the Irishman, Englishman and Scotsman Football Podcast. Thanks for listening, folks. Fino, thank you very much.
Cheers, guys. Always a pleasure.
Joe, thank you.
Thank you, JP.
Kev, brilliant as always.
See you again soon, mate.
Thanks, guys. I won't say enjoy the games because there are no Premier League games this weekend coming up. We'll be back again next Tuesday and look forward to chat you then. Enjoy the weekend. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to hear more of our podcasts, please click on the red subscribe button on the bottom right-hand side. Thank you.